My daughter didn't just knock my dinner plate to the floor, she did it slowly, deliberately, while looking straight into my eyes. Then she smiled like I was nothing more than a stain on her kitchen tile and said, "If you want dinner, pick it up." No one moved. Not my grandson Noah, not even my son-in-law Brian. And as I stared at the food scattered across the floor in the home, my late husband and I built something inside me shifted. Because in that moment I realized this wasn't anger. It was something colder, something planned. If you've ever felt disrespected by someone you gave everything to stay with me, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? I read every single one. If this story speaks to you, like, subscribe and share your thoughts. Because what happened next changed everything. My name is Doris Hudson, and until a year ago, I believed I had done everything right. I was 68, a widow of nearly 9 years, living in the same 2-story house in Columbus, Ohio, that my late husband Edward and I had bought when we were still young enough to argue about paint colors and laugh about it later. Edward had been a steady man, quiet, dependable, the kind who believed that if you worked hard and treated people fairly, life would return the favor. When he passed from a sudden heart attack, that belief was all I had left to hold on to. For decades, I worked as a senior accountant at a regional logistics firm. Numbers made sense to me. Balance sheets told the truth even when people didn't. I retired a few years after Edward died, not because I had to, but because the house had grown too quiet, and I thought maybe slowing down would help me find peace in it. I had one child, my daughter Vanessa. For most of her life, Vanessa had been bright, determined, and I believed kind at heart. She married Brian Miller in her early 30s, a man I didn't fully understand, but I told myself that wasn't my place. They had a son, Noah, who became the light of my life the moment I held him. If there was anything I was certain of, it was that I would always be there for them. Always. That's why when Vanessa called me one evening about a year ago, her voice trembling, I didn't hesitate. "Mom," she said, "we're in a little trouble. Brian had lost his job. Something about a failed business investment, real estate, I think, but the details were vague. Bills were piling up. The mortgage on their house was behind." Vanessa tried to sound composed, but I could hear the panic underneath. "We just need a little time," she said. "Just a few months to get back on our feet." I remember looking around my living room that night. The same floral couch Edward used to complain about. The framed photos on the wall, Vanessa as a child. Vanessa at her wedding, Noah, with his missing front tooth. I didn't see risk. I saw family. "Come stay with me," I said. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she exhaled like I had just saved her life. "Are you sure?" "Of course I am," I told her. "This is your home too." Looking back now, I wonder if that was the moment everything began to change. At first things felt right. Vanessa hugged me longer than she had in years when they moved in. Brian shook my hand and thanked me, really thanked me, looking me in the eye. Noah ran through the house like it was an adventure, asking if he could have the upstairs bedroom with the big window. We set up a rhythm. I cooked most evenings like I always had. Vanessa helped at first chopping vegetables, setting the table, asking me about recipes she used to love when she was little. There were moments, small ones, where I felt like I had my daughter back. "I don't know what we would have done without you," she told me one night standing in the kitchen while I washed dishes. I smiled and told her that's what family was for, and I meant it. I paid the utility bills without mentioning it, covered the grocery expenses. When Noah needed new school supplies, I took him shopping myself. When Brian mentioned they were having trouble making a car payment, I handed Vanessa a check the next morning and told her not to worry about paying me back right away. It didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. But slowly, so slowly, I almost missed it. Something shifted. It started with small things. Vanessa began rearranging the kitchen. At first, she said it was just to make things more efficient. She moved my spice rack, reorganized the cabinets, swapped out the plates I'd used for years for a newer set she bought on sale. "It's just more modern, Mom," she said lightly. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a kitchen. Then it spread. She changed the living room layout without asking. Moved Edward's armchair, the one he used every night, to the corner because it made the space look cramped. She replaced the throw pillows I'd had for years with ones in colors I didn't recognize. When I gently pointed out that I liked things the way they were, she laughed. "You're stuck in the past, Mom," she said. This place needed an update. It wasn't what she said that bothered me. It was how easily she said it. Brian rarely spoke during these moments. He would sit quietly scrolling on his phone or watching television as if none of it concerned him. But he never stopped her either. Then came the rules. "Let's try to keep dinner at 6 sharp, Vanessa announced one afternoon. "Noah needs structure." "Of course," I said. "And maybe we shouldn't have people over during the week," she added. "It's distracting for him." I thought of my neighbor Linda, who sometimes came by for coffee and nodded anyway. "All right. And Mom," she continued, her tone tightening just slightly, "we should probably limit sweets in the house. It's not healthy." I blinked at her, surprised. "I've always kept a little dessert," I said, "for after dinner." She gave me a look, one I didn't quite recognize at the time. Well, maybe it's time to change that. That was the first moment I felt it clearly. Not just discomfort, not just adjustment, but something else. Control. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, she was under stress. They had lost their home, their stability. Maybe this was her way of regaining a sense of order. But the changes didn't stop. Within a few months, it felt less like I was hosting my daughter and more like I was living in her house. She began correcting me in front of Noah. "Mom, don't say it like that," she would interrupt. "Mom, that's not how we do things anymore. Mom, you're forgetting again." Forgetting. I wasn't forgetting. I kept track of every bill, every appointment, every detail of that household. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been. But each time she said it casual, almost offhand, it planted a seed. One evening I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. "I'm just worried about her," Vanessa said softly. "She's not the same lately. I think she's starting to decline." I stood frozen in the kitchen, a dish towel still in my hands. Decline. My heart tightened, but I didn't confront her. I didn't want to believe what I was hearing. Instead, I made excuses for her. She's overwhelmed. She's scared. She doesn't mean it. But then came the moment that made it impossible to ignore. I had decided to drive to the grocery store on my own, something I had done my entire life without issue. When I came back, Vanessa was waiting in the doorway, arms crossed. "Where did you go?" she asked. "To the store," I said, confused. "By yourself?" "Yes." Her expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "That's not safe, Mom. I've been driving for 50 years, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. She shook her head. "You can't just do things like that without telling us." What if something had happened? Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "Not concern. Authority. I don't need permission to go to the store," I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "We'll talk about this later," she said. Later never came. But something else did. Something I didn't fully understand yet, but could feel building beneath the surface. Because by then, Vanessa wasn't just acting like she lived in my home. She was acting like it belonged to her. If I had to choose the exact moment when I stopped feeling like the owner of my own home and started feeling like a guest, an unwelcome one at that, it wouldn't be easy. Because it didn't happen all at once. It happened quietly, gradually, like a door closing inch by inch until you suddenly realize you're on the wrong side of it. Vanessa didn't just change things. She began to redefine them. The kitchen, once my space, became hers in ways she never said out loud but made clear in everything she did. She replaced my weekly grocery list with her own. "We're cutting back on processed foods," she announced one morning, scanning the fridge like she was inspecting a hotel she planned to renovate. I nodded, even though I had never considered the meals I cooked for decades to be anything less than wholesome. Then came the pantry. One afternoon, I walked in to find half of it empty. My canned goods, baking supplies, even the flour I used every Sunday, all gone. "Where did everything go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Vanessa barely looked up from her phone. "I threw some of it out," she said. "Expired stuff?" "You really need to keep track better, Mom." "Expired?" I had checked those dates myself just days earlier. "They weren't expired," I said carefully. She sighed like I had just proven her point. "This is exactly what I mean," she replied. "You think you remember, but you don't." There it was again. That word. Remember. As if my mind was slipping and I was the only one who hadn't noticed. I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Arguing wouldn't help. It never did. So I adjusted. Or at least I tried to, but the more I gave, the more she took. Soon it wasn't just the kitchen. It was the living room, Edward's armchair. The one place I still felt close to him wasn't just moved. It disappeared entirely. I found it in the garage, covered with an old sheet, like something that no longer belonged inside. "Vanessa," I said that evening, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. "Why is your father's chair in the garage?" She didn't even look apologetic. It didn't match the space, she said simply. It made the room feel outdated. "It's not about matching," I replied, my throat tightening. "It's about memory." She shrugged. "You're holding on to things that aren't practical anymore." I stood there staring at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the little girl who used to curl up in that very chair beside her father. But that girl felt very far away now. Brian, as always, said nothing. He sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone as if the conversation happening a few feet away didn't concern him. I began to notice that more and more his silence wasn't neutral. It was permission. Permission for Vanessa to keep pushing. Permission for me to keep shrinking. And I did shrink. Not all at once. Not in ways anyone else might notice. But I stopped inviting Linda over for coffee. The first time it was because Vanessa said Noah had homework and needed a quiet environment. The second time it was because she said it disrupted their routine. By the third time, I didn't ask anymore. Linda knocked on the door once unexpectedly, and I saw Vanessa's expression tighten before she even opened it. "Oh, hi, Vanessa," said, forcing a polite smile. "It's not really a good time." I stood just behind her, close enough to hear Linda hesitate. "I just wanted to check on Doris," she said gently. "I'm fine," I called out quickly before Vanessa could answer for me. Linda looked past her, meeting my eyes for just a second. There was concern there, questions. But I gave her a small smile, one I hoped looked reassuring. "I'll call you later," I added. I never did, because after that, Vanessa made it clear. We really need to limit visitors, she told me that night. Noah needs consistency. And honestly, Mom, too much stimulation isn't good for you either. Too much stimulation. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, trying to understand how a simple visit from a friend had become something that needed to be controlled. "I've lived here for over 30 years, I said quietly. "I've always had people over." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "And things change," she replied. "You need to accept that." I nodded, because what else was I supposed to do? But the truth was, things weren't just changing. They were being taken, piece by piece, until I barely recognized the life I was living. And still I told myself it would pass, that Vanessa was under pressure, that Brian's situation had put a strain on everything, that once they got back on their feet, things would go back to normal. But deep down, I think I already knew this wasn't temporary, this was becoming permanent. The first time she humiliated me in front of Noah, I realized just how far it had gone. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had made grilled cheese sandwiches, the kind Noah loved, with the crust cut off just the way he liked. He sat at the table, phone in one hand, barely looking up as he ate. "Noah," I said gently, "let's put the phone away during meals, okay?" It wasn't a command, just a reminder, something I had said 100 times before. But Vanessa heard it from across the room. "Don't tell him what to do," she snapped. I turned surprised. "I'm just asking him to focus on eating," I said. "He's fine," she replied sharply. "It's not your place to parent him." The words hit harder than I expected. "Not your place." "I'm his grandmother," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're overstepping," she cut in. Noah looked between us, his eyes wide, unsure. "I didn't mean anything by it," I said softly. Vanessa walked closer, her expression cold. "That's the problem," she said. "You don't think before you act anymore." There it was again, that implication, that something was wrong with me. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said more firmly this time. For a moment the room went quiet. Then she laughed. Not kindly, not even sarcastically, but dismissively, like I had just said something ridiculous. "No, Mom," she said. "You really don't." I felt my face flush, my chest tightening as I became painfully aware of Noah watching, absorbing every word. I had never felt so small in my own home. "I made lunch for him," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to help." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Then stick to cooking," she replied, "and leave the rest to me." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for me to realize that this wasn't just about control anymore. It was about erasing me, my voice, my role, my place in my own family. And yet, even then, I didn't fight back, because I was still holding on to something fragile. Hope. Hope that this was just a phase. Hope that my daughter would come back to me. Hope that if I stayed patient, stayed kind, stayed quiet, things would get better. But hope, I would soon learn, can be a dangerous thing, especially when the people you're hoping for are already planning something you can't yet see. And by then, Vanessa wasn't just treating me like I didn't belong. She was slowly convincing everyone else of the same thing. The night my daughter knocked my plate to the floor didn't come out of nowhere. It just felt like it did. In truth, everything had been building toward that moment. Every quiet insult, every small act of control, every time I swallowed my pride and told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That evening started like so many others. I was in the kitchen finishing dinner just before 6. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal I had cooked for decades, the kind that used to bring my family together without tension or silence hanging over every bite. Noah sat at the table, already his phone propped up beside his plate, a video playing softly. Brian leaned back in his chair, scrolling through something on his own device. Vanessa stood near the counter, arms crossed, watching me in that quiet, assessing way she had developed over the past few months. I placed the dishes on the table carefully, forcing a small smile. "Dinner's ready," I said. Noah didn't look up. "Hey, sweetheart," I added gently. "Let's put the phone away while we eat. Okay?" It was the same tone I had used his entire life. Calm, loving, not demanding. But this time it landed differently. Vanessa's head snapped toward me. "Don't," she said sharply. I blinked, confused. "Don't what? Don't tell him what to do," she replied, her voice tight. I glanced at Noah, who had frozen mid-bite, then back at her. "I'm just asking him to focus on dinner," I said. "It's not your place," she cut in louder now. Something in the room shifted. Brian looked up briefly, then back down at his phone as if he had already decided not to get involved. I felt my stomach tighten. "I'm his grandmother," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've always—" "And things change," Vanessa snapped. "You need to understand that." There it was again, that phrase, as if everything I had done was suddenly outdated, irrelevant. I took a slow breath. "This is still my home," I said quietly. "I'm not trying to take over. I'm just—" Before I could finish, Vanessa moved. It happened so fast, and yet in my memory, it plays in slow motion. Her hand came down hard against the edge of my plate. The porcelain tipped, slid, and then crashed onto the floor with a sharp, echoing sound. Food scattered across the tile, chicken, potatoes, green beans spreading out like something broken beyond repair. No one spoke. Noah's fork hovered in midair, his eyes wide. Brian froze for a second, then leaned back again, silent. "And Vanessa?" She looked at me, not with anger, not even with frustration, but with something far colder. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile touching her lips. "If you want dinner," she said evenly, "pick it up." The words didn't just land. They cut. I stood there staring at the mess on the floor, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. For a moment I thought I might say something, raise my voice, demand an apology, but the room felt different. Like I had stepped into a space where I no longer had authority, where my voice didn't carry weight anymore, and slowly, quietly, I bent down. I don't remember deciding to do it. I just did. My knees creaked as I lowered myself to the tile, my hands trembling slightly as I began to pick up pieces of food that only moments ago had been part of a meal I had made with care. No one helped me. Not Vanessa. Not Brian. Not even Noah, who sat frozen, unsure whether he was allowed to move. The silence was louder than anything Vanessa could have said, and in that silence, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else could see, but deeply enough that I knew things would never be the same again. I finished cleaning the floor without a word. I didn't look at her, didn't ask why, didn't defend myself, because in that moment I understood something I had been trying to ignore for months. This wasn't about a disagreement. This wasn't about stress or adjustment or temporary hardship. This was intentional, deliberate, and I was the target. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on a towel, and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of a chair scraping a fork, clinking against a plate knife, continuing as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over again. The look on her face, the way Brian had stayed silent, the way Noah had watched, learning something I never wanted him to learn. And beneath all of that, a question I could no longer ignore. Why not just why she had done it, but why she had been changing for months? Why she kept talking about my memory, why she controlled everything, why I felt like I was being pushed out of my own life. Sometime after midnight, I heard voices, soft at first, coming from the hallway just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath and listened. Vanessa and Brian. We can't rush it, Brian was saying quietly. If we push too hard, it's going to look suspicious. I know, Vanessa replied, but we're running out of time. Time for what? Brian asked. A pause, then more softly but still clear enough to send a chill down my spine for the paperwork, she said. We need her to sign before anything changes. My heart started to pound. Paperwork. What about tonight? Brian asked. That was a lot. Another pause. Then a small, humorless laugh. She needs to get used to it, Vanessa said. The more unstable she looks, the easier this will be. Unstable. My hand tightened around the edge of the blanket. So what's the plan? Brian asked. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. Timing, she said. And the right moment to get her signature. Signature. The word echoed in my mind. Suddenly, everything the comments about my memory, the control, the isolation began to shift into place. Not random, not emotional, strategic. I lay there completely still, my heart racing as the truth started to form in a way I couldn't yet fully understand but could no longer deny. This wasn't just about disrespect. It was about something much bigger, something planned. And for the first time since they had moved into my home, I was afraid. Not of being yelled at, not of being ignored, but of what my own daughter might be trying to take from me. Because whatever it was, she wasn't asking for it. She was preparing to take it. I didn't confront Vanessa the next morning. I didn't mention what I had heard. I didn't ask about the paperwork or the timing or the signature she and Brian were so careful about. I made coffee like I always did. I set out breakfast. I moved through the kitchen with the same quiet rhythm I had maintained for years. But inside, everything had changed. Because now I wasn't just confused. I was watching. And the more I paid attention, the more I started to see things I had missed before, or perhaps things I hadn't wanted to see. After Vanessa and Brian left to run errands that afternoon, I went into my late husband's study. It was the one room in the house Vanessa hadn't fully taken over yet, maybe because it was tucked away at the back of the house, or maybe because until recently she hadn't needed to. Edward had kept everything meticulously organized, file folders labeled in his careful handwriting, insurance documents, property records, tax returns, all in their proper places. Or at least, they used to be. I opened the top drawer of the filing cabinet and immediately felt a flicker of unease. Something was off. At first I couldn't pinpoint it. Everything looked mostly the same. The folders were still there, the labels still intact, but when I started going through them one by one, that unease sharpened into something much more concrete. Papers were missing, not everything, just enough to matter. The original deed to the house gone, a copy of Edward's life insurance policy missing, an older version of my will, the one I had drafted shortly after Edward passed, also gone. I stood there folder in hand, my pulse beginning to quicken. I knew I hadn't moved those documents. I knew exactly where they belonged. And now, they weren't there. For a moment I tried to reason it away. Maybe I had misplaced them. Maybe I had moved them to another drawer and simply forgotten. But even as the thought formed, I knew it wasn't true, because I didn't forget things like that. I never had. And that's when Vanessa's voice echoed in my mind. You think you remember, but you don't. A cold wave moved through me. No, this wasn't forgetfulness. This was something else. I closed the drawer slowly and stepped back, my thoughts racing. If those documents were gone, then someone had taken them. And there were only 2 people in that house who would have any reason to. I didn't panic. Not outwardly, but something inside me shifted again this time, not into fear, but into clarity. If Vanessa was planning something, I needed to understand exactly what. So instead of confronting her, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the bank. The branch manager, a woman named Claire Whitman, had known me for over a decade. She greeted me with a warm smile when I walked in, but I could tell immediately when I mentioned my daughter that something in her expression changed just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Doris, she said carefully, have you authorized anyone else to access your accounts recently? My stomach tightened. No, I replied. Why? She hesitated. Well, your daughter came in a few weeks ago. She asked some questions about your account structure. Said she was helping you manage things. I felt a sharp sinking sensation in my chest. What kind of questions, I asked. Balances, access permissions. She wanted to know what documentation would be required if she needed to assist you more directly. Assist me. The words felt wrong. I didn't give her any information, Claire added quickly. Without proper authorization, I can't. But I thought you should know she was asking. I nodded slowly, my mind already connecting the pieces. The missing documents, the talk of paperwork, the push to make me seem forgetful. This wasn't just about control inside the house. It was about something legal, something permanent. Thank you, I said quietly. As I stood to leave, Claire reached out gently. If you're concerned about anything, she said, lowering her voice, we can add extra security measures to your accounts. Just to be safe. I met her eyes. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't try to downplay what I was feeling. I think that would be a good idea, I said. From there, I drove straight to the one person I knew I could trust to tell me the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. Michael Grant. He had been Edward's attorney for years. After Edward passed, Michael helped me finalize my will, update property records, and make sure everything was legally in order. He was thorough, direct, and not easily rattled. Exactly what I needed. When I walked into his office, he greeted me with the same calm professionalism I remembered. Doris, he said, standing to shake my hand. It's been a while. What can I do for you? I sat down across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap. I think my daughter is trying to take control of my finances, I said. I didn't soften it, didn't dress it up. I said it exactly the way it felt. Michael didn't react with shock. He didn't dismiss it either. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying me. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. I told him about the changes in the house, the comments about my memory, the missing documents, the visit to the bank, the conversation I had overheard the night before. I watched his expression carefully as I spoke. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush me. But by the time I finished, his face had taken on a seriousness that made my stomach twist. What you're describing, he said slowly, fits a pattern I've seen before. I swallowed. What kind of pattern? He held my gaze. Guardianship exploitation, he said. The words hung in the air between us. They try to establish that you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs, he continued. Once that's in place, they can legally take control of your finances, your property, even decisions about where you live. A chill ran through me. You mean they could put me somewhere I asked? Yes, he said bluntly. A care facility, assisted living, somewhere they can justify as being in your best interest. My hands tightened. And the house, I asked quietly. If they gain legal authority, he replied, they could sell it. Everything inside me went still. This wasn't just a possibility. It was a plan. They mentioned a signature, I said. Some kind of paperwork. Michael nodded. They may try to get you to sign a power of attorney, or consent forms related to an evaluation. Anything that gives them a foothold. I thought back to the way Vanessa had been pushing documents toward me lately. Casual, urgent, insistent. Can they do it without my consent? I asked. It's harder, he said. But not impossible, especially if they can convince a court that you're not competent. My breath caught. All those comments, all those subtle digs at my memory. It wasn't random. It was preparation. What do I do? I asked. Michael leaned forward. You don't confront them, he said firmly. Not yet. I frowned. But you gather evidence, he continued. You protect yourself quietly, and you let them think they're still in control. I sat back, absorbing his words. It went against every instinct I had, but deep down I knew he was right. Because this wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was something else entirely. Something calculated. And if I wanted to stop it, I couldn't be the mother who hoped things would get better. I had to be the woman who saw the truth and acted on it. Even if that truth meant facing the reality that my own daughter wasn't just disrespecting me anymore, she was planning to take everything I had. I drove home from Michael Grant's office with both hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my thoughts moving faster than the cars around me. Guardianship exploitation. The phrase echoed in my mind like a warning bell that had been ringing all along. I had just refused to hear it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Vanessa. Not yet. I was going to do exactly what Michael told me to do. I was going to watch, and I was going to prepare. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. For a brief moment, it felt like it used to still calm mine. But that feeling disappeared the second I noticed the subtle changes that had become so familiar. Different shoes by the door, unfamiliar bags on the counter, Vanessa's presence in every corner. I set my purse down slowly and walked into the kitchen. Nothing had moved since that morning, but it didn't matter. I no longer trusted what I saw on the surface, because now I knew there was something happening beneath it. That evening I made dinner as usual. Vanessa came in just before 6, her energy sharp controlled. "How was your day?" she asked casually, setting her phone on the counter. "Quiet," I replied. She studied me for a second like she was trying to read something in my face. I kept my expression neutral. Brian walked in a few minutes later, barely acknowledging me. Noah followed, talking about something from school, his voice bright in a way that felt almost out of place in the tension that filled the room. We sat down to eat, and for the first time in months, I didn't say a word unless I had to. I watched. Vanessa served Noah first, then Brian, then herself. My plate came last. It was a small thing, but I noticed. I noticed everything now. After dinner, Vanessa stood up and began clearing the table. "Mom," she said almost as an afterthought, "I found some paperwork we should go over soon. Just some updates. Nothing complicated." My heart skipped, but I kept my voice steady. What kind of paperwork? Oh, just financial stuff. Insurance, maybe some planning for the future, she said lightly. It's better to get things organized before anything happens. Before anything happens. I nodded slowly. We can look at it later, I said. She smiled. Of course. But there was something behind that smile now, something I could finally see clearly. Expectation. Pressure. Timing. That night I didn't stay in my room. Instead, I sat quietly in the living room, a book open in my lap that I didn't actually read. I was waiting, and eventually, I heard it. Vanessa's voice, soft coming from the hallway. I stood up silently and moved just close enough to hear without being seen. She's starting to get suspicious, Brian said. Of course she is, Vanessa replied. That's why we need to move faster. My chest tightened. We can't push too hard, Brian said. If she refuses to sign? She won't, Vanessa interrupted. Not if we do this right. A pause. Then Brian lowered his voice. And if she doesn't? Vanessa didn't hesitate. Then we prove she can't make decisions anymore. My breath caught. How Brian asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Behavior, Vanessa said finally. Patterns. If we can show instability, confusion, it's enough to start the process. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my stomach. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. They weren't just thinking about it. They were actively planning it. I stepped back quietly, my heart pounding as I returned to my room. For a long time, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing. And then slowly, I reached for my phone. The next morning, I followed the second part of Michael's advice. I scheduled a medical evaluation. Not just a routine checkup, but a full cognitive assessment. If Vanessa wanted to paint me as unstable, I was going to make sure there was documented proof that I wasn't. The appointment was 2 days later. I didn't tell Vanessa where I was going. I have some errands, I said simply. She frowned slightly. What kind of errands? Just things I've been putting off, I replied. She hesitated like she wanted to push further. Then she nodded. All right. Just be careful. Okay. Careful. The word felt different now. Not protective. Controlled. The clinic was quiet, professional, efficient. Dr. Harris was a calm, straightforward man who didn't waste time with unnecessary pleasantries. What brings you in today, Mrs. Hudson? He asked. I looked him directly in the eye. I need a full evaluation of my cognitive health, I said, and I need it documented. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Is there a reason for concern? Yes, I said, but not the kind you might expect. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. Enough for him to understand that this wasn't about fear, it was about protection. The test took over an hour. Memory recall, problem solving, pattern recognition, verbal reasoning. I answered every question clearly, precisely. The numbers still made sense to me. Logic still made sense. And when it was over, Dr. Harris sat across from me with a small, reassuring smile. There's no indication of cognitive decline, he said. In fact, your results are well above average for your age. I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in days. I'd like that in writing, I said. Of course. He printed the report, signed it, and handed it to me. I held it carefully like it was something fragile but powerful, because it was. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't what Vanessa was trying to make me seem. Proof that I still had control, and I wasn't going to lose it without a fight. When I got home, Vanessa was waiting. Not sitting, not relaxed. Standing in the living room, arms crossed. "Where were you?" she asked. There was no softness in her voice this time. No pretense. I met her gaze calmly. "Out," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You didn't answer your phone." I didn't see it ring. That wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't ready to show her my hand. Not yet. She took a step closer. "You need to tell us where you're going," she said. "It's not safe for you to just disappear like that." "Disappear!" The word echoed in my mind. I tilted my head slightly. "I went to a doctor's appointment," I said. Her expression changed instantly. Concern. But not the kind a daughter shows. The kind someone shows when they're calculating. "What kind of appointment?" she asked. "Just a checkup," I replied. She studied me for a long moment. "Next time," she said slowly, "you should let me come with you." I smiled. A small, polite smile. "I don't think that's necessary." For a split second, something flickered across her face. Annoyance? Then it was gone. "All right," she said, but I knew. That moment mattered, because for the first time since all of this began, I hadn't given in, and somewhere beneath her calm exterior, Vanessa knew it too. After the doctor's visit, something inside me settled into place, not comfort, not relief, but clarity. For months I had been reacting. Now I was thinking. And once you start seeing clearly, it becomes impossible to go back to pretending you don't. I began to notice patterns in a way I never had before. Not just what Vanessa said, but when she said it. Not just what Brian did, but what he avoided doing. And most importantly, what they did when they thought I wasn't paying attention. 3 days after my appointment, I saw Brian go into Edward's study. It wasn't unusual for someone to pass by that room, but this time he didn't pass. He closed the door behind him. That alone was enough to make me pause. I stood at the end of the hallway listening. At first there was nothing. Then the faint sound of drawers opening, shifting. Paper. My heart began to beat faster. I moved closer, my steps slow and silent, stopping just outside the door. I didn't open it. I didn't need to, because I already knew. He was looking for something, or taking something. After a few minutes, the door opened. I stepped back just in time to avoid being seen. Brian walked out, his expression neutral, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He didn't notice me. He walked past without a word, heading straight toward the living room. I waited until he was gone. Then I went into the study. The air felt disturbed, like someone had moved through it with purpose. I went to the filing cabinet, opened the same drawer, and there it was. Another gap. Subtle, but real. A folder slightly out of place. Documents that had been neatly aligned no longer were. I didn't need to check each paper this time. I already understood what was happening. They were still gathering, still preparing, and whatever they were planning, it wasn't finished yet. That evening, Vanessa approached me again. She had a folder in her hand, thin, casual looking. But I knew better now. "Mom," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Do you have a minute?" I looked up from the chair, keeping my expression calm. "Of course." She sat across from me and placed the folder on the table between us. "I went over some things with Brian," she began. "We think it would be a good idea to update a few documents, just to make sure everything's organized." There it was again. That word. Organized. I folded my hands in my lap. "What kind of documents?" She opened the folder and slid a paper toward me. "It's just a standard authorization form," she said. "Nothing complicated. It would allow me to help you manage things if you ever needed it. If I ever needed it." I didn't touch the paper. Instead, I looked at her. "How soon do you need it signed?" I asked. Her eyes flickered just slightly. "Well, sooner is better," she said. "It's just being proactive." Proactive. Another carefully chosen word. I leaned forward slightly as if considering it. "I'd like to read it first," I said. Her smile tightened. "Of course. But it's pretty straightforward." "I still want to read it," I replied. For a moment, we just looked at each other. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. This wasn't a conversation. It was a test. She was watching to see if I would question her, if I would hesitate, if I would think. And for the first time, I didn't play the role she expected. "I'll go over it tomorrow," I said calmly. Something shifted in her expression. Not anger, not yet, but irritation, disruption. "All right," she said. "Just don't wait too long." I nodded. I won't. But I already knew. I wasn't going to sign anything. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I took the folder into my room. I sat under the lamp and opened it carefully. At first glance, it looked exactly like she said. Standard, simple, harmless. But I had spent decades working with numbers, contracts, and fine print, and I knew exactly where to look. It didn't take long. Buried halfway through the document, written in language that most people would skim over, was the truth. It wasn't just an authorization. It was a broad financial power of attorney. It would give Vanessa control over my accounts, my assets, my decisions, and once signed, it would be very difficult to take back. I felt a wave of cold anger move through me, not loud, not explosive, but steady, focused. Because this wasn't confusion. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intentional, carefully constructed, and she had handed it to me like it was nothing, like I wouldn't notice, like I wouldn't understand. I closed the folder slowly, set it down on the table, and for a long time, I just sat there in silence. Then from down the hall, I heard something, soft, a door creaking open, footsteps. I stood up quietly and moved toward the hallway, Noah's room. His door was slightly ajar. I could hear his voice. "When Grandma goes away," he said softly, "can I have the big room upstairs?" My heart stopped. Vanessa's voice followed. "We'll see," she said. "But yes, things will change soon. Things will change." I stood there frozen, not because I didn't understand, but because now there was no doubt left. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about preparing for the future. This was about removing me from the house, from control, from everything. I stepped back slowly, careful not to make a sound, returned to my room, closed the door, and for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel uncertain. I didn't even feel afraid. I felt something else. Resolve. Because now I knew exactly what they were planning. And more importantly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. They thought I was weakening, forgetting, becoming someone who could be controlled. But they were wrong. I wasn't fading. I was watching, learning, preparing. And when the time came, I wasn't going to be the woman on the floor picking up a broken plate. I was going to be the one who decided how this ended. By the time I met Michael again, I wasn't the same woman who had walked into his office a few days earlier. Back then, I was afraid. Now, I was prepared. I brought everything with me, the document Vanessa had tried to get me to sign, my notes about what I had seen and heard, even the memory of that quiet conversation outside Noah's room. Michael listened carefully, reading through the paperwork with a growing intensity in his eyes. When he finished, he set the document down slowly. "This is exactly what I was concerned about," he said. I nodded. "It's worse than I thought," I replied. "They're not just planning, they're moving." He leaned back slightly. "Then we move too," he said. There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. Just strategy. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Michael folded his hands together. "We gather evidence," he said. "Not just suspicion, not just interpretation. Clear, undeniable proof." I felt my chest tighten slightly. "And how do we do that?" He met my gaze directly. "We document their intent." The words settled heavily in the room. "You mean record them?" I asked. "Yes," he said plainly. "Legally." He explained the process carefully, what was allowed, what wasn't. How to ensure that anything we collected could be used if things escalated to a legal case. "This isn't just about protecting your assets," he added. "This is about protecting you." I nodded slowly, because now I understood that. This wasn't just financial anymore. It was personal, deeply personal. When I left his office, I had more than just instructions. I had a plan. That afternoon, while Vanessa and Brian were out, I made the first move. I didn't rush, didn't act impulsively. I followed Michael's advice exactly. I installed small, discreet recording devices in 2 places, the kitchen and the study. 2 rooms where Vanessa felt the most comfortable speaking freely. 2 places where control and planning had already begun to reveal themselves. I worked carefully, making sure everything looked untouched when I was done. By the time they came home, there was no sign anything had changed, but everything had, because now I wasn't just listening, I was collecting. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, only fragments. But on the third night, I got exactly what I needed. It started late, past midnight. I woke up to the sound of voices, faint but clear enough to know they were in the kitchen. I stayed in bed, didn't move, because I didn't need to anymore. The recorder was already there. The next morning, I waited until they had both left the house. Then I went into the kitchen, my hands steady but my heart beating just a little faster than usual. I retrieved the device, took it back to my room, and pressed play. At first there was silence, then footsteps, a chair scraping, and Vanessa's voice. "We don't have much time left," she said. My breath caught. Brian responded quietly. "I know, but this has to be clean. If anything looks off..." "It won't," she cut in. "I've already talked to someone about the process." My grip tightened on the edge of the device. "Someone?" "What did they say?" Brian asked. "That once we establish she's not stable," Vanessa replied, "everything moves quickly." Not stable. There it was again, the lie she had been building. "And the house?" Brian asked. A pause. Then Vanessa's voice lower now. "We sell it," she said. "Pay off the debts. Start over." My stomach dropped. There was no hesitation in her voice. No doubt. No guilt. Just certainty. "And your mom?" Brian asked. Another pause. Shorter this time. "We'll place her somewhere appropriate," Vanessa said. "Assisted living, maybe. Somewhere safe. Safe." The word felt twisted, like something meant to sound kind but hiding something much colder underneath. "And Noah?" Brian asked. Vanessa exhaled softly. "He'll adjust," she said. He's young. He won't remember much of this. I felt something inside me fracture. Not from the plan, not from the betrayal, but from that sentence. He won't remember. As if I were something temporary, something disposable. As if the years I had spent loving that child meant nothing. The recording continued. More details, more planning, more confirmation of everything I had feared. By the time it ended, I sat there in complete silence. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was proof. Clear. Undeniable. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt control, because now the truth didn't just exist in my mind. It existed in a form that couldn't be denied. Later that day, I met Michael again. I handed him the recording without a word. He listened carefully, his expression unreadable as the voices filled the room. When it ended, he looked at me. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. I nodded. "So what happens now?" He leaned forward slightly. "Now," he said, "we prepare to stop them." There was something final in his tone, something decisive. How I asked. "We let them think they're winning," he replied. "We let them take the next step." My stomach tightened. "You want me to wait?" "Yes," he said, "because the further they go, the stronger your position becomes." I understood what he meant, but it didn't make it easy. "Can they still do something before we act?" I asked. "Not if we move carefully," he said. "Your accounts are protected. Your evaluation is documented. And now, we have their intent." He paused, then added, "They're running out of time. They just don't know it yet." When I returned home that evening, Vanessa was in the living room scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I walked in. "There you are," she said. "I was starting to wonder where you went." I smiled slightly. "Just out," I replied. Her eyes narrowed for a brief moment. Then she nodded. "We should go over that paperwork soon," she said. "I don't want to delay things." "Delay things." I met her gaze calmly. "Soon," I said. And this time, I meant something very different than she thought. Because she believed she was getting closer to what she wanted. Closer to control, closer to ownership, closer to removing me from the life I had built. But what she didn't know was that every step she took forward was leading her exactly where I needed her to go, into the truth. And when that truth came out, there would be no denying it, no explaining it away, no pretending it wasn't real. Because this time, I wasn't the one being pushed out. I was the one setting the stage. And very soon, everyone would see exactly who Vanessa Miller really was. Waiting was harder than I expected. Not because I doubted what I was doing, but because every instinct I had as a mother told me to stop this before it went any further. To confront Vanessa, demand answers, force her to look me in the eye and explain how she had become this person. But Michael was right. If I moved too soon, I would only confirm what she wanted people to believe, that I was emotional, unstable, unpredictable. So I waited. And I watched. And I let her think she was still in control. A few days later, Vanessa made her next move. "Mom," she said casually over breakfast, "someone's coming by this afternoon. Just a quick visit. Nothing to worry about?" I looked up from my coffee. "Who?" "A consultant," she replied as if the word itself explained everything. "Just someone to help us figure out the best way to support you moving forward. Support me." The language was careful. Too careful. "What kind of consultant?" I asked. She gave me a reassuring smile, the kind she used when she wanted something. Just someone who works with families. You know, to make sure everything's in order. Everything's in order. I nodded slowly. All right. But inside, I already knew. This wasn't just a visit. This was a step. A calculated one. That afternoon, I made sure I was ready. Not outwardly. I didn't dress differently, didn't act differently, but inside I was focused in a way I hadn't been in years. When the doorbell rang, Vanessa rushed to answer it. I stayed in the living room, sitting calmly in my chair. A moment later, Vanessa walked in with a woman I had never seen before. Mid-40s, neatly dressed, professional. "This is Karen Doyle," Vanessa said. "She's here to talk with us for a bit." Karen smiled politely. "Mrs. Hudson, it's nice to meet you." I returned the smile. "You too?" Her voice was warm, but her eyes were observant, taking in details, not just of the room, but of me. "Would it be all right if we talked for a little while?" she asked. Of course, I said. Vanessa hovered nearby, her posture slightly tense, like she was waiting for something specific to happen. Karen sat across from me, a small notebook in her hand. "Vanessa mentioned that there have been some concerns about your day-to-day activities," she began gently. I glanced briefly at my daughter. Vanessa gave a small encouraging nod, as if urging me to confirm what she had already said. I turned back to Karen. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. Karen paused. "Well, memory mostly, organization, safety." There it was, laid out clean and simple. I folded my hands calmly. "I manage all of my own finances," I said. "I cook, clean, maintain this house. I drove myself to my doctor's appointment last week without any issues." Karen nodded slowly, writing something down. "And how do you feel about your current living situation?" she asked. I chose my words carefully. "I opened my home to my daughter and her family when they needed help," I said. "I'm glad I could do that." Vanessa shifted slightly behind her. Karen glanced up. And now she asked. I met her eyes. Now I said, "I feel like I'm being evaluated in my own living room." The room went still. Vanessa's breath caught just slightly. Karen didn't react immediately. She simply nodded again and made another note. "Do you ever feel confused about where you are?" she asked. "No." "Do you forget important tasks?" "No." "Have you experienced any difficulty managing your personal affairs?" "No." Each answer was clear, direct, unshaken. Vanessa stepped forward slightly. "Mom," she said gently, "you don't have to be defensive. We're just trying to help." I turned my head slowly. "I'm not defensive," I replied. "I'm answering the questions." Karen's eyes flickered between us. And in that moment, something changed. Subtle, but real. Vanessa saw it too, because her tone shifted, sharpened. "Mom, you forgot to pay the water bill last month," she said. "That's not true," I replied calmly. "It was paid on time. I have the receipt." Vanessa hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Karen wrote something down. "And what about the groceries?" Vanessa pressed. "You bought expired food." I held her gaze. "No, I didn't," I said. "You threw away food that was still good." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Karen closed her notebook slowly. "I think I've heard enough for today," she said. Vanessa blinked. That's it for now," Karen replied. She stood, offering me a polite smile. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Hudson." "You're welcome," I said. As she walked toward the door, Vanessa followed quickly. I stayed where I was, but I could hear their voices low urgent just outside. "That didn't go the way you said," Karen murmured. "I told you she can be very convincing," Vanessa replied. A pause. Then Karen again. She answered every question clearly. There were no signs of confusion. Vanessa's voice dropped. "You didn't see her last week. She gets worse under pressure." Another pause. Longer this time. Then Karen spoke again, quieter. "If there are concerns, they need to be supported by consistent evidence, not isolated claims." The front door opened, then closed. When Vanessa walked back into the living room, her expression had changed. Not defeated, not yet, but something was different. Tighter. More controlled. "How did that feel?" she asked. I looked at her. "Unnecessary," I said. Her jaw clenched. "We're just trying to make sure everything is handled properly." I nodded slowly. "I'm sure you are." We stood there for a moment facing each other, and for the first time, there was no confusion between us, no misunderstanding, just awareness. She knew I wasn't as passive as she thought, and I knew she wasn't going to stop. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the quiet of my room and thought about what had happened. Karen hadn't confirmed anything, but she hadn't dismissed it either. Vanessa still had room to push further, to try again, to escalate. And she would. I knew she would, because people don't go this far. Only to stop halfway. But that was all right, because now every move she made only made my position stronger. Every attempt, every lie, every step forward was leading her closer to something she couldn't control, the truth. And when that truth finally came out, it wouldn't just be my word against hers anymore. It would be undeniable, unavoidable, and irreversible. I turned off the light and lay back in bed, staring into the darkness. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready, because whatever Vanessa was planning next, I was going to be there, watching, waiting, and when the moment came, I wouldn't hesitate. After Karen Doyle's visit, something shifted in the house. Not visibly, not in a way an outsider would notice, but I could feel it. Vanessa became more careful, and at the same time, more aggressive. Like someone who had realized the plan wasn't working as smoothly as expected, and was now trying to force it forward. The very next morning, I noticed the first change. My car keys were gone. I stood by the small wooden tray near the front door where I had placed them every day for years. They weren't there. I checked the kitchen counter, my purse, even the pockets of the coat I had worn the day before. Nothing. A slow, familiar tension began to build in my chest. I turned around and walked into the living room. Vanessa was sitting on the couch, her laptop open, typing. "Have you seen my car keys?" I asked. She didn't look up immediately. Then casually, as if it were nothing, she said I put them away. I frowned. "Where?" She finally looked at me. "With me," she said. "It's better this way." Better this way. I took a step closer. "What do you mean?" Her expression didn't change. "I don't think it's safe for you to be driving alone right now." The words were calm, measured, practiced. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my voice steady. "I've been driving for over 50 years, I said. "There's nothing wrong with me." Vanessa sighed like she had expected that response. "Mom, this isn't about arguing," she said. "It's about being responsible. Responsible." I stared at her. "This is my car," I said quietly. "And I'm trying to protect you," she replied. Behind her, Brian sat at the dining table pretending to read something on his phone. Pretending, because I could see the tension in his posture. He was listening. He just wasn't stepping in. Again. "I want my keys back," I said. Vanessa held my gaze. "Not right now," she replied. For a moment, the room went completely still, and I realized something. This wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't concern. It was control, and if I pushed too hard, it would only give her more to work with. So I did something she didn't expect. I stepped back. "All right," I said calmly. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. She had been ready for a fight, for resistance, for emotion, and I gave her none of it. "Thank you," she said slowly, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, because she didn't understand why I had backed down, and that was exactly what I wanted. The next move came later that day. I was in Edward's study when I noticed something else missing. His watch. It had been sitting in a small wooden box on the shelf for years. I hadn't touched it since the day he passed. It was one of the few things I kept exactly as it had been. Now, it was gone. I stood there staring at the empty space, my throat tightening. Not because of the object itself, but because of what it meant. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. They were starting to take pieces of him, of us, of everything this house had been. I walked back into the living room slowly. Vanessa was on her phone. Brian was in the kitchen. "Vanessa," I said. She looked up. "Yes." "Where is your father's watch?" Her expression didn't change. "What watch?" I held her gaze. "The one in the study." She shrugged slightly. "I moved some things around. It's probably packed away." Packed away. The same phrase she had used for Edward's chair, where I asked. "I don't remember exactly," she replied. I felt something tighten in my chest. "That watch belonged to your father," I said. "And now it belongs to this house," she said evenly. "And I'm organizing this house." Organizing. Always organizing. I took a slow breath. "Please, find it," I said. "I will," she replied, already looking back at her phone. But I knew. She wouldn't. Because it wasn't lost. It was taken. That evening I checked the recorder in the study. I didn't do it every day. Only when I felt something shift. And something had shifted. I closed the door behind me and pressed play. At first there was nothing. Then footsteps. Brian's voice. "Did you really need to take the watch?" Vanessa's reply came quickly. "She doesn't use it." "That's not the point," Brian said. A pause. Then Vanessa again. "We need to start clearing things out anyway," she said. "It'll make the transition easier." Transition. My grip tightened around the device. "She's going to notice," Brian said. "She already notices everything," Vanessa replied. "That's why we need to move faster." There it was again. Faster. Always faster. And the hearing Brian asked. My heart skipped. "Hearing." "It's scheduled," Vanessa said quietly. "Already?" "Yes." A pause. Then Brian again. "What if she fights it?" Vanessa didn't hesitate. "She won't," she said. "And if she does, it won't matter." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. I turned off the recorder slowly. A hearing. They had already set it in motion, without telling me, without my consent, without even pretending anymore. I sat down in Edward's chair, the one I had quietly brought back into the room days earlier, and stared at nothing for a long time. This was it. This was the step Michael had warned me about, the point where planning turned into action, the point where things became real. But instead of panic, I felt something else. Certainty. Because now everything was out in the open. Not publicly. Not yet. But enough. Enough for me to act. That night I called Michael. "They've scheduled a hearing," I said. There was no surprise in his voice. "Good," he replied. I blinked. "Good. Yes," he said. "Because now they've committed, and that means we can stop them properly." I exhaled slowly. "What do we do?" "We let them proceed," he said. "And then we respond with everything we have. Everything we have. The evaluation, the recordings, the evidence, the truth." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "All right," I said. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. Vanessa looked up from the table. "You okay?" she asked. I met her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw someone else entirely. "I'm fine," I said. She studied me for a second, then nodded. "Good," she replied. But there was something in her voice now, not confidence, not control, something else, something uncertain. Because even though she didn't know it yet, the ground beneath her plan had already started to shift, and very soon, everything she thought she was building was going to collapse. The hearing date arrived faster than I expected. Vanessa never told me directly, not once. She didn't sit me down, didn't explain what she had filed or why. Instead, she continued moving through the house as if everything were normal: cooking, organizing, making small talk, all while something far more serious was unfolding behind the scenes. But I knew, because Michael had already received the notice, and because for the first time in months, I wasn't the last one to find out. The night before the hearing, Vanessa approached me again. "Mom," she said, standing in the doorway of the living room, "we should talk tomorrow." I looked up calmly. "About what?" She hesitated just briefly. "About your future," she said. "My future." I nodded. "All right." She watched me for a moment as if waiting for a reaction. When none came, she turned and walked away, but I could feel it. The tension, the expectation. She thought she had already won. The next morning I dressed carefully, not overly formal, not dramatic, just composed, calm, clear, because that's what I needed to be. When we arrived at the small courthouse in Columbus, Vanessa walked slightly ahead of me, her posture straight, her expression controlled. Brian followed behind, quieter than usual. I noticed something else, too. They avoided looking at me, not out of guilt, but out of focus, like I was already separate from them, like I wasn't part of the same side anymore. Inside the room was smaller than I expected. A judge's bench, a few rows of seating, a table where Vanessa and Brian sat, and another where Michael was already waiting for me. He stood when he saw me, offering a small, steady nod. "You're ready?" he said quietly. I nodded back. "Yes." Vanessa glanced over at us, her eyes narrowing slightly when she saw Michael. She hadn't expected that. "Good." The hearing began quickly. No long introductions, no unnecessary delays. Just facts. Or at least, Vanessa's version of them. "She has been showing signs of cognitive decline," Vanessa said, her voice soft but steady. "Memory lapses, confusion, difficulty managing basic tasks." I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, listening, Watching, she's forgotten Bill's misplaced important documents and has become increasingly unpredictable, she continued. Predictable. That word almost made me smile, because the only thing predictable in this situation was her. Michael stood when it was his turn. Your Honor, he said we strongly contest these claims. The judge nodded. On what basis? Michael turned, slightly gesturing toward me. On the basis that Mrs. Doris Hudson is fully capable of managing her own affairs, he said. And we have documented evidence to support that. Vanessa's expression tightened, but she said nothing. Not yet. Michael handed over the medical evaluation, Dr. Harris's report. Clear, detailed, unmistakable. The judge reviewed it carefully, then looked up. This indicates no signs of cognitive impairment, she said. Michael nodded. That is correct. Vanessa shifted in her seat. But that's just one evaluation, she said quickly. You didn't see her at home. You didn't see how she behaves day to day. The judge raised an eyebrow slightly. And you have evidence of that, she asked. Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, there was a crack. Well, not formal evidence, she admitted, but observations. Observations are not sufficient, the judge said calmly. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then Michael spoke again. Your Honor, he said we also have additional evidence we would like to present. Vanessa's head snapped toward him. What evidence, she demanded. Michael didn't look at her. Instead, he handed over a small device. The recording. My heart beat faster, but my expression didn't change. Because this was the moment. The judge pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room. Clear, unfiltered. We don't have much time left. The color drained from her face almost instantly. Brian froze beside her. The recording continued. Once we establish she's not stable, we sell it. We'll place her somewhere appropriate. Each word landed heavier than the last, each sentence stripping away the image she had tried so carefully to build. When it ended, the room was completely silent. The judge looked up slowly. At Vanessa, at Brian. At what point, she asked quietly, did this become about your mother's well-being? And not her assets. Vanessa opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. It's not like that, she said quickly. You're misunderstanding. Am I? The judge interrupted. Vanessa's composure began to crack. She needs help, she insisted. She's not thinking clearly. Michael stepped forward. On the contrary, he said. She has been thinking very clearly, which is why she took steps to protect herself. Protect herself. The words echoed through the room. Because now, the truth wasn't hidden anymore. It was exposed. Complete. Unavoidable. Brian shifted in his seat, his voice quieter when he finally spoke. Vanessa, maybe we should— Don't, she snapped. But it was too late. The damage was done. The image she had built was gone. The judge leaned back slightly. This petition for guardianship is denied, she said firmly. Relief didn't come in a rush. It came slowly, steadily, like something settling into place after a long time out of balance. And I strongly advise you, the judge continued, looking directly at Vanessa, to reconsider your actions moving forward. Vanessa said nothing. She just sat there, still, staring, as if the reality of what had just happened hadn't fully reached her yet, but it would. I stood slowly, not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. Michael placed a hand lightly on my arm. "It's over," he said quietly. I nodded, but I knew it wasn't over. Not completely. Because what happened in that room wasn't just a legal decision. It was something else. Something deeper. A line. Drawn clearly between who I had been and who I was now. As we walked out of the courthouse, Vanessa finally spoke. "Mom." I stopped, turned, looked at her, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel uncertain. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I just felt clear. "We'll talk," I said, but my voice was different now. Not soft, not hesitant, final. Because whatever came next wasn't going to be on her terms anymore. The silence in the car on the way home was heavier than anything that had been said in that courtroom. Vanessa sat in the front seat staring straight ahead, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Brian drove his knuckles pale against the steering wheel, saying nothing. I sat in the back watching them, not as a mother watching her family, but as someone finally seeing the truth without any illusions left to soften it. No one spoke. Not until we pulled into the driveway. The engine cut off, and for a moment we all remained where we were, suspended in that quiet space between what had just happened and what was about to. Vanessa was the first to move. She opened the door quickly and stepped out, walking toward the house with a stiffness in her shoulders that betrayed everything she was trying to hold in. Brian followed more slowly. I took my time. When I stepped inside, Vanessa was already in the living room pacing. The moment she saw me, she turned sharply. What was that? She demanded. Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It wasn't controlled. It was raw. I set my purse down carefully. That, I said, was the truth. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. The truth, she repeated. You went behind my back. You recorded us. You made me look like some kind of criminal. I met her gaze. You did that yourself, I replied quietly. Her expression twisted. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising. We were trying to help you. By taking my house, I asked. By protecting you, she snapped. From what I said. My own life. The words hung in the air between us. Brian stepped forward slightly. Vanessa, maybe we should stay out of it. She cut in, not even looking at him. He stopped immediately. Of course he did. Vanessa turned back to me, her eyes sharp, searching, almost desperate now. You embarrassed me, she said. In front of everyone. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not even sadness. Clarity. This was never about embarrassment, I said. It was about what you were planning. Her jaw tightened. You're twisting it, she said. You're making it sound worse than it was. I took a step closer. Then explain it, I said. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because there was no explanation that would undo what had been heard. No version of the story that would make it right. And she knew it. Brian spoke again, quieter this time. We were in a difficult position, he said. Things got out of control. I looked at him. You mean your finances? I asked. He swallowed. Yes. And that made it acceptable, I said. No, he said quickly. But it... Don't, I interrupted. He stopped. Because he knew. There was no justification left. Vanessa exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. You don't get it, she said again, but this time her voice was different. Less certain. Less controlled. I had to fix things, she continued. Everything was falling apart. The house, the debts, Noah. And your solution, I said, was to take everything from me. Her eyes flashed. I was going to take care of you, she insisted. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I let out a slow breath. I don't need you to take care of me, I said. You do, she shot back. You just don't see it. There it was. That belief, that certainty, the one she had built everything on, that I was the problem, that I was the one who needed to be managed. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. You needed control. The words landed harder than anything else I had said, because they were true. Vanessa's expression faltered, only for a moment, but I saw it, and so did Brian. She's right, he said quietly. Vanessa turned on him instantly. What Brian stepped back slightly, but he didn't look away this time. She's right, he repeated. We went too far. The room went still. Vanessa stared at him like she didn't recognize him. You're turning on me now, she said, her voice rising again. I'm not turning on you, he replied. I'm telling the truth. The truth, she echoed. The truth is we were drowning and you didn't have a solution. And this was yours, he said. This. She didn't answer, because she couldn't. Because now everything was out in the open, not just between us, but between them. And that was something she hadn't planned for. Vanessa's breathing quickened, her composure slipping further with every passing second. I was trying to save us, she said finally. At that, something inside me softened, but not enough to change what needed to happen. I know, I said quietly. She blinked. Caught off guard, but you were willing to destroy me to do it, I continued. The silence that followed was different. Not tense, not explosive, just heavy. Real. Vanessa looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not control, not anger, but something else. Something closer to realization. And underneath it, fear, because now she understood. This wasn't something she could talk her way out of. This wasn't something she could control anymore. This was the consequence of what she had done. What happens now? She asked. Her voice was quieter, smaller, and for a moment, she sounded like the daughter I used to know. I held her gaze and answered honestly. You leave, I said. Her face went still. What? You and Brian? I continued. You need to find somewhere else to live. The words were calm, but firm, final. You're kicking us out, she said. I'm asking you to leave, I replied. That's the same thing, she snapped. No, I said. It's not, because this is still my home. The words landed with a weight that hadn't been there before, because now they were undeniable. Vanessa shook her head, disbelief flashing across her face. You can't do that, she said. I can, I replied. And I will. Brian looked down his shoulders, slumping slightly. He knew. Vanessa stared at me, searching for something, any sign that I might change my mind. She didn't find it. Fine, she said finally, her voice tight. If that's how you want it. It wasn't how I wanted it, but it was what needed to happen. She turned and walked out of the room. Brian hesitated for a moment, then followed. I stood there alone in the living room, the quiet settling around me in a way that felt both unfamiliar and long overdue. Because for the first time in months, the house felt like mine again. But I knew this wasn't the end. Not really. Because some things don't end with a single decision. They echo, they linger, they leave behind something that takes time to understand. And as I stood there listening to the distant sound of doors closing and footsteps moving through the house, I realized something else. This wasn't just about taking my home back. It was about reclaiming something much deeper. My voice, my boundaries, myself. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. The house felt different the morning after I told Vanessa and Brian to leave. Quieter, but not peaceful. Not yet. There was a heaviness in the air, like something unresolved still lingered in every room, in every corner where their presence had slowly taken over. I woke early out of habit more than necessity and sat at the edge of my bed for a long time before I moved. For months, I had adjusted my mornings around them. Now, I didn't have to, and somehow that felt unfamiliar. When I walked into the kitchen, Vanessa was already there. Not dressed to go out, not busy, just standing by the counter staring at nothing. She turned when she heard me. Her face looked different. Not angry, not controlled, just tired. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, moving slowly, deliberately. Then I sat down. "I'm listening," I said. She hesitated. That alone told me more than anything else. Vanessa had never hesitated before. Not in months. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said finally. I looked at her. "What did you think would happen?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. I thought we could fix things," she said, "that we could take control before everything fell apart." I held her gaze. "At what cost?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, because now she knew. There was no version of this where the cost wasn't me. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quietly. The words landed, but they didn't settle. "Then why did you—" I asked. Her eyes filled not with tears yet, but with something close. Frustration. Guilt. Maybe both. "Because I didn't know what else to do," she snapped suddenly. Everything was collapsing. The debts, the pressure, Brian losing, everything. It was like we were drowning and you were just there. Just there. The phrase stung more than I expected. "I was helping you," I said. "I know," she said quickly. "I know you were. But it wasn't enough." I sat back slightly. Not enough. The words echoed in my mind. All those years, I said slowly, everything I gave you. It wasn't enough. "That's not what I meant," she said, shaking her head. "Then explain it to me," I said. Her voice softened. "I meant it didn't fix what was happening to us," she said. "We needed something bigger, something permanent, something permanent." I understood now. This had never been about survival. It had been about control, about security, about building something stable at my expense. "You thought taking my house would solve that," I said. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked down. "We would have taken care of you," she said again, quieter now. There it was. That belief. Still clinging. "I don't need to be taken care of like that," I said. She looked up at me. "You don't understand," she said. "You've always been strong, independent. You don't know what it's like to feel like everything could disappear at any moment." I studied her. "You think I don't know that?" I asked. She hesitated. "I was there when your father died," I continued. "I built my life back from that. I managed everything on my own. I didn't take from anyone else to survive." Her eyes flickered, because that was something she couldn't argue with. "But I also didn't pretend everything was fine when it wasn't," she said. And you think I did? I asked. You worked all the time, she said. You weren't there like you should have been. The words landed harder than anything else she had said. Not because they were entirely true, but because there was enough truth in them to hurt. I took a slow breath. So this is about the past, I said. It's about everything, she replied. For a moment we sat in silence, because now the conversation had shifted. It wasn't just about what she had done, it was about why. And that made it harder, more complicated, but not enough to change what needed to happen. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. The words came out quickly, almost urgently. I shouldn't have done it like that. I shouldn't have pushed you. I panicked. I looked at her carefully. This was new. Not the apology itself, but the way she said it. Less controlled, less calculated, more real. But still not complete. Are you sorry for what you did, I asked, or for getting caught? She froze. The question landed exactly where it needed to. I'm sorry for all of it, she said, but her voice wavered. And I knew she wasn't fully there yet, not fully accountable, not fully honest. And that mattered, because apologies without truth don't change anything. I love you, she added, her voice softer now. That one hurt, more than anything else, because I loved her too. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the plan, despite the way she had looked at me when she knocked my plate to the floor. I know I said quietly, and I meant it, but love wasn't the issue. Trust was, and trust had been broken. Not in a moment, but over months, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of it. You still have to leave, I said. Her face tightened. Even after all this, she asked. Yes, I replied. Her eyes filled slightly now. So that's it, she said. You're just done with me. I shook my head. No, I said. I'm done with being treated like I don't matter. The distinction was important, and I needed her to hear it. This isn't punishment, I continued. It's a boundary. She looked at me searching, trying to understand. Or maybe trying to find a way around it. There's a difference, I said, and if you don't learn it, this will happen again. With someone else, in some other way. She didn't respond. Because somewhere deep down, she knew I was right. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said. Her head lifted slightly, but I'm not letting you control it either. That was the line. Clear. Unmovable. And for the first time, she had no way to cross it. We sat there for a long time after that, not arguing, not explaining, just sitting in the space between what we had been and what we were now. Eventually, she stood. I'll start packing, she said. I nodded. All right. She hesitated at the doorway, then looked back at me. I didn't think you'd fight back, she said. I met her gaze. Neither did I replied. And that was the truth, because the woman I had been months ago would have stayed quiet, would have kept hoping, would have kept giving, but that woman was gone. And in her place was someone who finally understood something she should have known all along. Love doesn't mean surrender, and kindness doesn't mean weakness, and sometimes the hardest thing you can do is stand your ground, even when it breaks your heart. Vanessa began packing that afternoon, not dramatically, not loudly, just methodically. Drawer by drawer, closet by closet. The quiet sound of zippers, boxes, and footsteps moving back and forth through the hallway became the new rhythm of the house. Brian helped, though less visibly. He carried things out to the car, avoided eye contact when we passed, and kept his words to a minimum. There was something in his silence now that felt different, not permission this time, but resignation. He knew this was over, not just the plan, but whatever illusion they had been holding on to. I stayed mostly in the living room that first day, not out of avoidance, but because I didn't want to stand in the doorway of every room watching my daughter dismantle what little was left of the life we had tried to rebuild together. Still, I heard everything. The closet doors opening, the quiet arguments under their breath, the tension that had nowhere left to go, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Noah. He moved differently than the others, slower, quieter, watching more than speaking. That evening, as Vanessa and Brian took another load out to the car, Noah lingered in the hallway. I noticed him standing there, unsure, his hands tucked into the sleeves of his hoodie. "Hey," I said gently. He looked up. "Hi, Grandma." His voice was soft, careful, like he wasn't sure what he was allowed to say anymore. I motioned toward the chair across from me. "Come sit for a minute." He hesitated, then walked over and sat down, his eyes flicking briefly toward the front door as if checking how much time he had. We sat in silence for a moment, then he spoke. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried more weight than anything else that had been said in that house for weeks. I leaned forward slightly. "No," I said. "You're not in trouble." He frowned. "Then why do we have to leave?" I took a breath. Because there was no easy answer, and no child should have to carry the truth of something like this. Sometimes, I said slowly, adults make decisions that don't work out the way they expect. He looked at me, trying to understand. Like what he asked. Like trying to fix a problem the wrong way I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. "Did Mom do something wrong?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth mattered, but so did how it was given. "Yes," I said finally. He looked down. "But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you," I added gently. His shoulders relaxed just a little. "And it doesn't mean I don't love you," I said. He looked up again. "Even if we leave." "Especially then," I said. That seemed to settle something inside him. He nodded slowly. Then after a pause, he said something I hadn't expected. "I didn't like it when she knocked your plate," he said. My chest tightened. "I know," I replied softly. "I didn't know what to do," he added. "You didn't have to do anything I said. That wasn't your responsibility." He nodded again, but I could tell he had felt it. The tension, the wrongness of it. Children always do. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. The words hit me harder than anything Vanessa had said. I reached out and took his hand. "You don't have anything to be sorry for," I said, and I meant it, because he was the only one in that house who hadn't tried to take something from me, the only one who had simply been caught in the middle. Vanessa came back in just then. Her eyes immediately moved to Noah. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Just talking," he said. She nodded, but her expression tightened slightly. "We need to finish packing," she said. He stood up slowly, then looked back at me. "Can I still come visit?" he asked. Vanessa hesitated. "I didn't." "Yes," I said. Her eyes flickered toward me, but she didn't argue. Not this time. Because some things she no longer had control over. The next 2 days passed quickly. Boxes filled the hallway. The house slowly returned to something closer to what it had been before. Not exactly the same, but closer. On the final morning, Vanessa stood in the living room with her coat on her bag by the door. Brian was already outside. Noah waited quietly near the car. Vanessa looked around the room, at the furniture, the walls, the space she had tried to claim. Then she looked at me. "This didn't have to happen," she said. I held her gaze. "Yes, it did," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You could have worked with me," she said. "I tried," I said. "You just didn't like the terms." She didn't respond. Because, again, there was nothing left to say. "I meant what I said," I added. "You can still be part of my life." She looked at me searching, but not like before I continued. She nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding, because that line wasn't going to move. "All right," she said. She picked up her bag, walked to the door, then paused. For a moment it looked like she might say something else, something more, but she didn't. She just opened the door and walked out. The sound of the car starting echoed through the quiet house, then faded, and then there was silence. Real silence. Not the kind filled with tension, not the kind waiting for the next argument, just quiet. I stood there for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just feeling it. Because this wasn't victory. Not really. It was something else. Something heavier. But also necessary. I walked slowly through the house, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. Each space felt different now, lighter, but also marked by everything that had happened there. When I reached Edward's study, I stopped. His chair was back where it belonged, the way it should have been all along. I sat down carefully, ran my hand along the armrest, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not complete, not perfect, but real. Because I had done something I never thought I would have to do. I had chosen myself. Over comfort, over silence, over the fear of losing my daughter. And even though it hurt, even though it still hurt, I knew it was the right decision. Because some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost. And this house, this life, this sense of who I am, was one of them. The first morning after they were gone, I woke up before the sun. For a few seconds I didn't move. I just lay there listening. No footsteps in the hallway, no doors opening and closing, no low voices behind walls that were supposed to feel safe. Just silence. Real silence. The kind I hadn't felt in months. I sat up slowly, letting that quiet settle around me. It wasn't empty the way it had been after Edward passed. This silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. Space. I hadn't realized I'd lost. I walked into the kitchen and paused in the doorway. Everything was still. The counters were clear. The chairs were pushed in properly. The light coming through the window felt softer, somehow warmer. For the first time in a long time, I made coffee without thinking about anyone else's routine. No schedule to follow, no tension to navigate, no voice correcting me. Just me. I carried the mug into the living room and sat in Edward's chair. His chair, exactly where it belonged. I ran my fingers along the armrest just like I had the day before and let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "I did it," I whispered. Not to anyone in particular, just out loud. Because I needed to hear it. The days that followed were quiet, but not lonely. That surprised me. I had always feared that losing proximity to my daughter, even under these circumstances, would leave some unbearable emptiness behind. But it didn't, not the way I expected. Instead, there was a kind of calm that slowly began to take its place. I called Linda 2 days later. She answered on the second ring. "Doris," she said, her voice full of relief. "I've been worried about you." "I'm all right," I said. "I just needed some time." She didn't press. "Do you want to come over?" she asked gently. "Or I can come to you." I smiled. "You can come here," I said. When she walked through the door that afternoon, she stopped just inside, looking around like she was trying to read the space. "It feels different," she said. "It is," I replied. We sat in the kitchen for hours talking not just about what had happened, but about everything I had pushed aside for so long. Friendship, laughter, life outside of obligation. It felt grounding, like I was reconnecting with parts of myself that had been quietly fading. I started going back to church the following Sunday. At first I hesitated. I didn't want questions. Didn't want sympathy. But what I found there wasn't pity. It was presence. People who didn't need explanations to offer kindness. People who simply welcomed me back. I began tending to the garden again. Edward had loved that garden. Every spring he would spend hours out there adjusting soil, trimming branches, making sure everything had what it needed to grow. After he passed, I had tried to keep it up, but over time it became something I did out of habit, not care. Now, it felt different. Pulling weeds, replanting flowers, watching new growth push through the soil, it reminded me that things could start again, even after being neglected, even after being damaged. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Vanessa left, I received a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I didn't open it right away. I held it in my hands for a long time, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Then finally, I sat down and read it. "Mom, I don't know where to start. I've gone over everything in my head 100 times since we left, and I still don't have a version of it that makes me look good. I know that now. I told myself I was trying to fix things, that I was protecting my family. But the truth is, I crossed a line. More than one. I don't expect you to forgive me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I needed to say that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught. For all of it. I'm trying to figure out how to be better. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm trying. Noah asks about you all the time. I told him he can visit if you're okay with it. I love you. Vanessa." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it on the table. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix anything, but it was something. A beginning, maybe, or at least an acknowledgement. And sometimes that's where real change starts. A few days later, Noah came to visit. He knocked on the door like a guest standing there with his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched. I opened the door and smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Grandma." He stepped inside, looking around like he was seeing the house for the first time again. "It looks the same," he said. I nodded. "It is." We spent the afternoon together, simple things. Lunch, a board game, a walk in the garden. Nothing complicated, nothing heavy, just time. Before he left, he hugged me tightly. "I like it here," he said. I held him just as tightly. I'm glad I replied, because that was something no one had been able to take from me. Not Vanessa, not Brian, not any plan they had tried to carry out. The connection I had with him was still there, and it mattered. That evening I made dinner for myself. I set the table the way I always had. One plate, one glass, one place. And when I sat down, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole, because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be diminished. Family doesn't mean surrendering your boundaries. And strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about knowing when to stop enduring and start standing. I picked up my fork, took a bite, and smiled faintly to myself, because this time, the plate stayed exactly where it belonged, and so did I. There are moments in life when the hardest truth we have to face is not about strangers, but about the people we love most. Sometimes the very ones we give everything to are the ones who take the most, not always out of pure cruelty, but out of fear, desperation, or a belief that they are justified. But here's what I learned: love does not require you to accept disrespect. Kindness does not mean you must tolerate being diminished. And being a parent does not mean losing yourself to your child. Boundaries are not punishment. They are protection. Not just for your home, your finances, or your safety, but for your dignity, for your identity, for the part of you that deserves to be treated with respect, no matter your age. And here's something even more important. It's never too late to take your power back. It's never too late to say this is enough. And it's never too late to rebuild a life where you feel safe, in your own home, and in your own heart. If this story touched you, I'd really love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Do you think Doris made the right decision? Have you ever faced something similar? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read those first. And if you believe in standing up for yourself even when it's hard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me for more stories that remind us we're not alone.